Okay, let's dive into this. Welcome to today's explainer, where we're going to unpack a true architectural puzzle. We are looking at the Konya Alâeddi Mosque, sitting right on top of Alâeddi Hill in Turkey. And this isn't just a standard place of worship. Based on our source material, this structure is the absolute pinnacle of Anatolian Seljuk power. It's a living monument, a brilliant mashup of architectural synthesis and master craftsmanship in both stone and wood. It quite literally embodies the empire that built it. To really decode its secrets, we're going to take a hybrid historical and spatial tour. Here is our agenda. We'll trace its century-long construction, meet the master hands behind the mosque, and check out its wild architecture and recycled materials. Then, we'll step inside for some truly unique works of art, and finally, end at the eternal resting place of the Seljuk sultans. Having this structured roadmap is really going to help us wrap our heads around this incredible place. So, Section 1, a century of construction. Because, a building this complex definitely wasn't built overnight. Unlike your typical monument that just goes straight up from a single blueprint, this massive project grew horizontally. It was pieced together like a giant puzzle over decades. 3 completely different sultans oversaw this, and each left their own personal signature on the layout. It kicks off between 1116 and 1156 with Sultan Masoud I. He laid the foundations and got the minbar completed. Then, Sultan Kılıç Arslan II steps in. From 1156 to 1192, he expands the whole thing, sets up the mihrab area, and even adds the first courtyard tomb. But it's Sultan Alâeddin Kikubad I, ruling from 1220 to 1237, who really gave it its final magnificent shape. He added this monumental north facade and pushed out the eastern and western wings. Actually, it was his grand finishing touches that ultimately earned the building its name, the Alâeddin Mosque.
Moving right along to Section 2, the master hands of the mosque. Time to meet the actual geniuses who swung the hammers and carved the stone.
We talk a lot about the royal patrons, but the craftsmen here, their names are literally carved right into the stone and wood. They wanted us to remember them. First up, we've got Alâeddi Mehmed bin Havlan. He was the chief architect for Kikubad's massive expansion, the visionary who basically tied the whole complex together. Then there's Alâeddi Mingubert, an absolute wizard with wood who crafted the mosque's breathtaking minbar back in 1155. And you can't miss Karamuddin Erdebili. He was the Seljuk master behind those intricate structural details and the mind-blowing tile work. It's just incredible seeing how these distinct experts fused architecture, woodwork, and tile artistry into one cohesive vision. Which brings us to Section 3, Architecture and Recycling. Let's start the virtual tour outside, shall we? Imagine you're standing on that commanding hill, looking up at this striking, dual-colored facade, black and white marble blocks straight out of the Syrian architectural playbook. And the entrances? Just wow. The east portal is completely decked out in elegant Seljuk thuluth script and these hanging honeycomb-like niches we call mukarnas. Meanwhile, the west portal acts almost like a giant billboard documenting Kikubad's huge expansion. But here's the wild part. The second you step through those massive doors into the harem, the main prayer hall, you'll notice it's totally asymmetrical. The angles of the east and west wings don't match at all. It proves this place wasn't just built from one static blueprint. It evolved and adapted. And speaking of evolving, once you're inside that asymmetrical hall, you'll spot something super surprising for an Islamic masterpiece. It relies heavily on a concept called spolia, or in Turkish, devşirme. This is basically the ancient world's version of recycling, taking older building materials from past civilizations and repurposing them for brand new structures. Just take a look at that number, over 40. Inside this distinctly Seljuk space, the flat wooden roof is literally being held up by more than 40 recycled Roman and Byzantine columns and capitals. The sheer volume of these ancient pillars creates this dense stone forest, a hypostyle layout that actually echoes early Arab mosque traditions. Practically speaking, it creates this wonderfully cool, acoustically brilliant space that could handle massive crowds. It's quite literally the ruins of ancient cultures physically supporting a new empire. How cool is that? Let's head further in for Section 4, Unique Works of Art. These are the undisputed crown jewels of the interior. This is where those craftsmen we mentioned earlier really showed off. Right in front of the mihrab, you look up and see this specialized dome supported by squinches, arches built across the corners to hold the weight. And the inside of that dome is just dripping in Seljuk tile mosaics, navy, turquoise, purple. It's stunning. Then, directly below it, you have the mihrab itself, which points the way to Mecca. This thing perfectly blends carved marble, geometric patterns, and those Mukarnas honeycombs with even more of that exquisite tile art. It's an absolute masterclass in using colorful tiles to elevate an architectural space. But honestly, if one piece of art steals the entire show, it's the member, the pulpit, completed in 1155. It uses a mind-bending woodworking technique called kundekari. Imagine the precision here. The craftsman, Mengu Burt, took pieces of ebony and walnut and just interlocked them. No nails, zero glue. Just pure geometric tension and masterful carving, holding it all together for centuries. Our source highlights this as one of the absolute earliest and most perfect examples of kundekari in all of Anatolia.
Now, before we head back outside, I've got to point out that the Seljuks weren't the last ones to leave their mark. Take a look at the minaret on the northwest corner. The base is original Seljuk for sure, but that cylindrical brick body and the balcony, those were actually restored much later by the Ottomans, specifically under Sultans Abdul Hamid I and II. It's a subtle touch, but it shows how this building was treated as a living, cared-for monument across completely different imperial eras.
All right, let's step back out into the courtyard for our final stop. Section 5, the eternal resting place of Seljuk sultans. Out here, you'll find the Royal Cemetery, or Kumbetler. Now, this isn't just a graveyard. It is a profound physical flex of the Seljuk Empire's dynastic power. Inside that main 10-sided tomb with the classic pyramidal roof, 8 of the most powerful Seljuk sultans are resting in beautiful tile-covered sarcophagi. 8! That is an unbelievable concentration of history. You've got the original patrons like Mesud I and Kılıç Arslan II resting right alongside Kekubad I and others, all gathered under one roof. But there's a stark contrast out here that tells the true story of the empire. On one hand, you have the Kılıç Arslan tomb, that glorious, completed, 10-sided masterpiece holding those 8 sultans. But right next to it, you have what's known as the Nameless, or Unfinished tomb. It's an octagonal structure started by Sultan Izzeddin Kekavus I, but he died suddenly, political chaos broke out, and the tomb was just left completely unfinished. Seeing them side by side brilliantly captures both the towering heights and the wildly volatile political realities of the era. So what does this all mean? When you step back and look at the Konya Alâeddi Mosque, you see an asymmetrical floor plan. You see repurposed Roman and Byzantine columns holding up an Islamic prayer hall. You see the distinct visions of 3 different Seljuk sultans and the restorative hands of the Ottomans. On paper, it probably shouldn't work, yet it stands as an absolute masterpiece. Could it be that these very irregularities, this massive recycling of past civilizations, are exactly what make it the ultimate perfect architectural synthesis? It's a fascinating question, isn't it? Thank you so much for joining me on this explainer. I really hope this leaves you eager to go out and uncover more of the incredible stories hiding in the stones of our past.